Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Jennifer Jackson and it's so great to be here with you today on this video called EFT tapping, the science behind the magic. So I'd like to begin with a little note from one of my clients who says, EFT is off the charts. I'm a different person than I was a couple months ago. When I try to think about the issues I came in for, I realize they're gone. The heavy feelings that had been weighing me down for so long seem to be permanently erased from my consciousness by this amazing technology. When I think about all the time and money I've spent over the years on different therapies and supplements, I realize I could have saved so much if I had just started here. I feel so good all the time now. So, what is EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, or the magic tool of tapping? EFT, as I just said, stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, but it's probably best known as tapping because it literally involves tapping with your fingers on the same meridian points used in acupuncture. Now, tapping looks a little funny and at first seems ridiculously simple. I have to admit that when I first heard about it, I thought, how could this possibly work? This is so simplistic. But I soon learned that EFT is a powerful tool with an outstanding record for helping people overcome a wide range of conditions, including PTSD, which stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, emotional overeating, physical pain, fears and phobias, and much, much more. This presentation is going to focus on how tapping can help with divorce recovery. So, in this presentation, we're going to learn the science behind the magic. So divorce throws our lives into upheaval. Not only do our emotions explode, but what was once secure becomes insecure, and the future suddenly becomes this vast ocean of unknowns. So it's natural to feel fearful, anxious, and emotional when so much change happens at once. In fact, we're wired to feel this way because all this change poses a threat to our well-being. By wired, I mean how our brains are put together. So let's take a quick look at the three-part human brain. First to develop was the brainstem and the cerebellum. And that is this green part here, and it's the oldest part of the brain. It's also called the reptilian brain, and it deals with basic survival issues. Next to develop was the midbrain, or the limbic system, and that's this part in the middle here. And it's also called the mammalian brain, or emotional brain, because it deals with emotions, the encoding of emotions, and long-term storage of emotional events, and has the job of keeping us safe. Now, last to develop was the squiggly part here called the neocortex, and that is the newest part of the brain. It developed millions of years after the more primitive parts, and it's part of the brain most strongly associated with being human. It's where logic, reason, and higher-order thinking reside. And it's what makes possible the learning of languages and other high-level skills. So you may be familiar with the stress response, which is probably better known as fight or flight response. Now, in that limbic system, there is a little piece called the amygdala. And the amygdala has the job of keeping us safe. It's often called the body's smoke alarm because the minute it detects a threat in the environment, it initiates this fight or flight response, which is a series of physiological changes designed to protect us. So during fight or flight, everything speeds up. Your heart beats faster, more blood is pumped to your arms and legs, your brain waves quicken, and stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol flood your body. In short, everything to make our ancestors as fast, strong, and alert as possible so they could have the best chance of either fighting a smaller threat or escaping a larger one. Well, this is super helpful whenever you come face to face with a saber-toothed tiger. Not so helpful when you're trying to recover from an emotional ordeal such as a divorce and the events leading up to the breakup. Now, fight or flight was designed for short-term emergency situations. It was not designed to be used for long periods of time. However, during a divorce, it's common to remain in fight or flight for months or years on end which often leads to difficulty sleeping, excessive weight gain or loss, depression, physical pain, or a generalized feeling of fear or anxiety. What tapping does with amazing efficiency is to halt this fight or flight response in its tracks. Now, you might have noticed that the limbic system, this red part of our brain here, predates language and logic by millions of years. This means that this more primitive part of the brain doesn't understand English, Spanish, Swahili, or any other human language. Although telling yourself to get over it and get on with it may be great advice, the part of the brain controlling the switches for the stress response may not be getting the message. It may be like those old Charlie Brown cartoons. Remember when the teacher spoke, all the kids heard was wah, 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 wah. That's what I imagine the limbic system understanding when we try to communicate with it using language and logic. But tapping on the meridian points is a form of communication the limbic system can receive and respond to. When the meridian points are tapped, the limbic system receives signals of calm and peace, and it responds by deactivating this stress response. So EFT practitioners have been observing this for decades, but for those of us who like proof, we now have scientific research to confirm it. Researchers at Harvard Medical School have been studying the effects of acupoint stimulation on midbrain arousal, and they have documented with MRI and PET scans that when certain acupoints are stimulated, the activity in the limbic system associated with stress and fear go way down. They can even see the amygdala lowering its flag of distress. In 2012, another team of researchers studied the effects of EFT on cortisol levels, and they determined that EFT was able to reduce cortisol levels at an unprecedented rate. So in short, scientific studies have confirmed that EFT reduces the physical symptoms of stress by communicating with the primitive nonverbal limbic system and directing it to call off the fight or flight response. EFT is also known for greatly diminishing the emotional intensity around past traumatic events. EFT is perhaps most famous for its tremendous success with PTSD, which again stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. Up until recently, PTSD was a very difficult condition to treat, but EFT is one modality that has proven to be very successful because of its ability to reduce emotional intensity around events in the past. So there's another part of the limbic system called the hippocampus that is involved in categorizing things. As you go about your day, the hippocampus is constantly determining whether the experience you're having is emotionally significant enough to go into long-term memory storage. So let's imagine that it's a typical Tuesday morning. You've maybe had your shower, gotten dressed, and might be in the middle of your morning cup of coffee. So far, the hippocampus doesn't have much to do. It's just a pretty mundane, uneventful morning. You can sit back and relax. But all of a sudden, the phone rings, and on the other end is news that a loved one has been in a serious car accident and now is in critical condition in the ICU. Suddenly, the hippocampus is tagging and flagging and everything, and what had started out to be a mundane morning, not worthy of notice, is now categorized as an emotionally charged event and is headed directly into long-term memory storage. So here's how EFT can help. If you hold a picture of an event that was stressful that hasn't been processed, feelings are going to come up, strong feelings of anger or fear or shame or guilt or any uncomfortable emotion. And as you hold that picture and tap and feel those feelings and tap on the meridian points, the hippocampus gets the message that this is no longer happening, this isn't a current trauma, and it can actually recategorize this event from the trauma category into a more neutral category. So I wish this picture was reversed, so we go from high emotion to low emotion. When this happens, clients generally report that this memory that was so highly charged just minutes before now simply feels like a story that happened. The memory no longer feels within them, but beside them. Another thing the hippocampus and amygdala do is they are constantly comparing what's happening in your present moment to what's already in long-term storage. So let's extend that example and imagine it's 2 months later. And again, you're having a quiet weekday morning, nothing really going on, but suddenly the phone rings. And this time, because of what's already in storage, that might trigger a stress response. We don't know who's on the other end. It could be a good thing or a neutral thing or a wrong number, but hearing that phone ring may trigger that old memory, and you might feel your heart start to beat faster or stress hormones coursing through your body. But with EFT, we can remove that trigger from the storage compartment so that we no longer activate it in the same way. In fact, scientists speculate that EFT not only lowers the emotional intensity around particular events, but actually permanently alters the neural pathways in your brain. So when conditioned fear pathways in the limbic system are eliminated, similar stimuli no longer produce the same responses. In other words, EFT is actually able to rewire the brain so that events held in storage no longer get triggered in the same way. So here's a really clear example of this. I had a client come in for insomnia. 8 years before she came in, she slept fine like a normal person. But 8 years before, her husband had died in bed from a heart attack. Now, this client had gotten really good grief counseling, and she had moved on to become a content single woman. But there was one big problem. Whenever she tried to go to bed between 10 and 11, she would lie awake until between 2 and 3 in the morning. So we were able to help this right away. She came in and we got to work and we called up that horrible night, and immediately she was flooded with the emotions of overwhelm and helplessness and fear and guilt and sadness and grief, and all of those painful emotions. We were able to tap them to a very neutral place. And that night she was able to get a really solid sleep, go to bed at a pretty normal hour, and sleep well. And as far as I know, she has been able to sleep pretty normally ever since. So EFT works powerfully on 3 different levels. It reduces the physical symptoms of stress by calling off or halting a stress response. It dramatically reduces the emotional intensity around past traumatic events by sending signals of calm and peace to the part of the brain storing the event. And it rewires the brain to respond differently to future situations by moving events from the traumatic category into a more neutral category in long-term memory storage. Once these events are recategorized, they're no longer triggered in the same way by current events. So you can imagine divorce is such a stressful time in your life, and so many things are causing stress and anxiety, and all of that stress and anxiety unchecked can get stuck in your body and cause physical problems. So if you are curious about this and would like to see a demonstration, you can move to my How to Tap video and see how that works. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in future videos.